Rise and shout. It is time for a Friday edition of What's Trending. And let's just go right to what happened under the Thursday night lights at LaVell Edwards Stadium. Jarom, BYU beats Utah State 38-26. The Cougars were a 24-point favorite.
I heard that.
We all knew it. BYU wins by half of that, allowing the Aggies to score a garbage touchdown. We lost a couple of bets. Now we got to buy lunch for some people. 2 lunch bets where we gave the points to individuals. So maybe you're not the right person to ask this question to because you had some side bets in play. But was winning the game last night for BYU, again by a final of 38-26, was that enough for the Cougars?
I'm going to say no, Spence, that winning wasn't enough. The standard's high here. BYU feels like, and we feel like, it is a Power 5-like program. Next year it officially will be. BYU beat a top 10 team at home. I think we're holding this team to that standard. And when Vegas tells you you're a 21 and now 24-point favorite in consecutive weeks against a group of 5 teams that are in the Mountain West, and you play at home, you feel like you should dominate. BYU did not dominate the last 2 weeks. In fact, 14 and 12-point wins make you feel like there's something left there. So the good news is we haven't seen BYU at its best. Perhaps they've saved it for Notre Dame and Arkansas. That's the hope. But the way that BYU's banged up, the way that BYU was undisciplined on defense with 3 offside calls at home, personal foul, roughing the passer call that it was on his hip, not his legs, and they went at Jaron's knees.
Maybe a lack of situational awareness that late in the game.
Obedience to the rules, Spence. Hashtag safety zone. I feel like there's more out there. I don't feel like that it was enough. That's not to say I'm not happy about winning. I just think BYU is capable of more. But perhaps BYU isn't the team that we're holding the standard up to. I don't know. I feel like we're going to learn the next 2 weeks exactly who BYU is. Or have we already seen that, Spencer? Have we already seen that BYU is playing more like a great group of 5 team who's just worried about winning, not margin? I feel like we're worried about margin because we feel like BYU's better than that. And the last 2 weeks, they haven't exactly shown that. Is BYU the team that beat Baylor? Is BYU the team that lost to Oregon? I would say no on both accounts. So what is BYU? Are they the team that played the last 2 weeks? So far, that's what we've got to go on. I think BYU's better than this, and they can be that. That's why I feel a little disappointed with yesterday.
I have now taken on the mantra of just being okay with beating everybody on the schedule. Notre Dame and Arkansas obviously winning by 1 point is fantastic. But I'm talking about everybody else. Boise State, Liberty, East Carolina. Okay, maybe not Utah Tech, but everybody else, just win. Like, okay, whatever. I don't care if you win by 1 point. Like, no more emphasis on.
Why is this?
Just because I feel like there is so much attrition with injuries and guys coming in and out, and just it is so difficult to win in college football because the week-to-week variance is wild, right? I mean, even we bring up Arkansas, we're like, oh man, Arkansas coming in, they're a really good team, which they are. They were down by 2 scores to Missouri State at home in the 4th quarter. How does that happen to a team like Arkansas on their home field? We're asking the same questions about how is BYU not like running away from Utah State right now? A team that lost to Weber State 35-7.
It's hard not to feel that way when that happened with Weber State and UNLV and Connecticut, frankly.
Week-to-week variance is just, it's a fickle beast. And think about this.
So you don't care about the means as much anymore, just the end.
Find a way.
You won, you're
Find
good.
a way. Find a way. BYU couldn't find a way against Coastal Carolina. They couldn't find a way against UAB. They couldn't find a way against Boise State.
They found a way in a lot of other games.
Yes. So, and it's like, hey, I don't care. Just win. Because do we look, even last season, do we look back at last season at the 10 wins and think, man, I wish that BYU would have won by, a touchdown more than they beat Washington State by. Ugh. Like, do we care about that? No, we talk about the win total. We talk about the win total. So at the end of this season, I feel like we'll be in the same place. If BYU wins 10 games this year, nobody's going to care that BYU only beat Wyoming by 14 or beat Utah State by 12. Nobody will care. Now, if BYU continues to show a trend and they lose to ECU or they lose to Liberty with the same issues of starting slow,
this is the concern,
not being able to stop the run, then okay, all right.
This is it.
For sure. But it's almost like people have already resigned to the fact that BYU is not going to be able to fix any of this. They've shown us who they are. 3 games in a row, they have not been able to stop the run. It's over. BYU is going to get run over by Notre Dame. They're not going to be able to stop Arkansas. do we just need to like push pause for a second and be like, okay, should we see if BYU can make some changes, get a little more healthy, and then maybe determine? Like Robert and I, we talk about this a lot. He says it takes 6 games to really know what you are as a football team.
We need one more.
Okay, one more.
But still, and you bring up the point I was going to bring up, which is, I think what we're afraid of is the trend that. Perhaps
that's totally
that this isn't
understandable.
temporary, but that's the normal. That BYU is undisciplined on defense. That offensively, BYU struggles to run the ball in first halves for some reason. Like whatever it is, I'm with you. BYU's 4-1. This is a game ahead of schedule from the preseason, probably. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We were like hoping for 4-1. 3-2 was probably
4-1. We thought was the realistic best case scenario.
We weren't going to go 5-0. Come on. Now the next 2 weeks, it's split. Go split. 2-0, probably, obviously, that would be incredible. Let's be real. Come on. Let's get real.
Yes.
Split.
And guess what?
Split would be great.
By nature of the big game, the bigger scene, and one of those coming at home, you can't tell me that BYU's not going to show up even more motivated. And listen, this is something
You're talking Arkansas?
I'm talking, yes, Arkansas in Provo.
Which, by the way, Monday we'll find out, hopefully, that's an 8:15.
Hopefully it's a late game.
We hope that's an 8:15.
Regardless of
That's when BYU started playing well against Utah State, by the way. Around 8:15. What?
We're talking about 18 to 22-year-old kids.
In BYU's case, 24.
It is really difficult, truth, to get everybody motivated as much as you would for a Baylor or an Arkansas or a Notre Dame.
But I thought BYU was mature.
So, sometimes it's tough. Was BYU maybe overlooking Wyoming and Utah State? Probably a little bit. Probably. Is there some entitlement there? Yeah, I think so.
BYU's ranked. They feel confident.
Yes.
They're at home.
Okay.
They should dominate. Should they not?
Utah State lost to Weber State by 28. They lost to UNLV.
Yeah.
It's going to be somewhat more easy for us. Meanwhile, Utah State's making a quarterback change, putting in a brand new offense that looked just like Coastal Carolina's offense in 2020.
Minus the option, yes, the RPO.
It's just so situational. It's very, very different. It's a fickle thing. What if Jake Oldroyd makes 2 field goals? And let's say Jacob Boren doesn't get a penalty, and BYU wins 44-20.
We feel different.
Is everybody feeling way better about things?
Yes, because
that's how fickle it is.
Yes, and I get. Listen, in the end, the end matters more than the means. But the means do matter because the means tell us about who you are and how you got there. 4-1 is awesome. No one's debating whether 4-1 is awesome, right? My fear is if the same BYU team that rolled out the last 3 weeks shows up against Notre Dame and Arkansas, that BYU could go 0-2.
Sure.
And now you're 4-3, Spence. Now we're going, okay, that Baylor win was awesome, but that was a massive anomaly, and BYU didn't blow out Wyoming and Utah State, got the wins at home, awesome. But in these 2 other of the 4 big games, BYU went 1-3. And now BYU's an 8-4 kind of team at this point because you're probably going to stumble at some point down the stretch. But BYU's very talented. This still could be a 10-2 squad. And if they figure some things out and they can pull off an upset against Notre Dame, or BYU's probably going to be a favorite at home against Arkansas, which is pretty gnarly. Can we do they're an underdog to Arkansas at home like Baylor? I'd like that a little bit. BYU plays well as the dog in that case. I'm interested to see what BYU team shows up the next 2 weeks because BYU's pretty banged up. Again, we've got to learn from the UAB situation last year. We couldn't expect the same BYU team that rolled out against Utah to show up against UAB. It was a different squad. I know we say next man up. The next man up's not as good as the starter.
That's being naive.
It is. And those guys are giving great effort and doing their best, ... This BYU team is banged up right now. There's some notable injuries. However, it was good to see Max Tooley back, pick 6, number 1 in the country with 2 of those, by the way. Jaron Hall is incredible, E-word, elite. He's playing so good right now, by the way, because he played a game yesterday ahead of everybody else, number 1 in the country in pass yards at the moment.
Okay.
He'll be passed up, but at the moment.
Well, I think 1473 is what he's at right now.
It's pretty good. No Chase Roberts, no Malik Moore,
no Puka Nacua.
Can Chase Roberts and Puka Nacua come back next week? Malik's got a decision to make because if he did hurt his hand significantly, let's say it's broken or whatever, Does he redshirt? Does he play with a club? Like, he's got a thing to figure out here.
BYU missed him a lot last night.
Yes.
And against Wyoming. He was injured on the first drive of the game against Wyoming.
That's tough.
He sat out essentially 2 full games now.
And Chase Roberts barely played last week as well. That's tough.
All of these things factor in.
I knew Chase wasn't playing when I walked in with like an hour to go, and I'm like, there's Chase Roberts outside the stadium. You're not playing tonight.
Nope.
Dang it. But maybe they've been saving him for Notre Dame. Because the last 2 weeks have been a build towards these 2 games. I know the team has taken Wyoming and Utah State and tried to beat them, right? And they did.
Sure.
But let's be honest.
Again,
this season's going to be defined by how you do in those Big 4 games. And if you slip up where you shouldn't. I'm going to give BYU 1 slip up down the stretch. Post Arkansas, 1 slip up.
9-3 regular
Probably going to
season.
happen. Yeah. 9-3 regular season would be great because you're going for 10 in that bowl.
Sure. Okay, so I want to see a couple. I'm hoping for a couple of things when BYU comes out in Las Vegas against Notre Dame, and that is
You're always
one.
playing Notre Dame next week.
Yes.
This is awesome.
9 days from last night. Yeah, so we're 8 days
Rest
from today.
up.
Yes. Just a quicker start. And I'm not even talking
Yeah.
about offensively. Like yeah, it'd be great.
Rushing?
I'm just talking about like energy and urgency on both sides of the ball.
Okay.
Just like it just feels like it takes a little bit to get
It
the
does.
engines revving on both sides of the ball.
It does.
Okay? Like, can the spark happen early? Like, so the slow
The all
starts.
spark.
The slow start's not just for the offense; it's for both sides of the ball to get those guys like really engaged early, and maybe just the intensity and the stage against Notre Dame will do that by natural circumstances. You're playing in front of a huge crowd. You're
Hard
super
not to
excited.
be juiced
Okay.
in that moment.
Cody Epps talked about like slow starts
Okay.
and just maybe a way to overcome some of those. Listen to this.
I think we probably just have to start off a little bit faster because these guys they have lost a couple games, but they're still a great team, and they're going to come to play and they're going to come to fight. It's Notre Dame, traditional Notre Dame. So we got to come ready and we got to hit them in the mouth early.
Okay. The question is, how do you do that? Is it just natural because the game's a big game?
Bring the juice, execute. Like, how are we going to quantify this, Spence? BYU moves the chains. They get a field goal.
They don't have a
or
couple
touchdown.
of 3-and-outs in the first quarter.
Yes. Also, you don't allow a sustained drive where third down, there's an offside at home. Like, that was bad.
Yeah, again, fickle things, right? Like these
That's
penalties.
discipline.
These penalties took drives for Utah State and just really lengthened them out.
Rush game. Come on. Negative 21 yards in the first.
Awful.
And then 25 rushes for 138 yards. By the way, shout out to Cody Epps, 5 for 68, touchdown. Touchdown 3 straight games now, by the way. Ethan Erickson, what a catch. Who's Ethan Erickson? Now you know. And then, Christopher Brooks comes in, 10 for 90.
Can we get the running game
2 games
established a little bit early? Part
Yes.
of a faster start.
And I don't care. It's got to get established. But if you move the chains and score consistently, like BYU had a 2-play drive with a passing touchdown, and it was like, this is going to be a fun night. Nope. It slowed down. It didn't work. Okay, topic 2, game day guarantees. Guaranteed to not go right. So we both go 1 for 3. The one I got. Oh, well, let's go through it. BYU rushed for 2+ TDs. Nope, just 1. Chris Brooks.
Late.
Okay, and late. Got it.
Should have been 2. I thought they were going to get score another touchdown late.
I know.
You
2.
guys-
Well, that would have helped the line, right?
Yep.
Cougs will have a positive turnover margin. Oh, +3.
Yep.
+3. Did BYU need +3 to win this game like that? Like, if it's even, Spence, does BYU win by 7?
The pick 6 helps early in the game.
And
that's for
Cooper
sure.
Legoff fumbles inside the 15. Big plays there. Utah State was this close to being way more in this game. And then BYU, will they have 500? They'll have 500 yards of total. No, 396. BYU's offense can do much better. They can.
Yes.
And that's the exciting part is you're still winning despite not playing well, but it's like, shoot, is that a trend or is that a thing you're going to fix quick?
All right.
That's the question.
My game day guarantees. I, too, was 1 for 3, as you mentioned. I said BYU will score first. I bought into the, hey, slow start against Wyoming. Like, BYU's going to come out maybe a little more juice. That wasn't the case.
You know what your problem was? The coin toss.
Cooper Legoff and Utah
Because
State.
Utah State got it first.
Got it first. And they marched down the field and scored first. So, there. Jaron Hall will complete passes to at least 6 different receivers. It was exactly 6.
How about that?
Thank you, Ethan Erickson.
Oh, Ethan Erickson,
only
first catch of his career is a
If
touchdown.
he doesn't catch that, it doesn't happen.
5.
Okay? So, thank you, Jaron Hall, and thank you, Ethan Erickson. And then I thought Jacob Conner would play because I expected BYU to be up by 20 plus late in the game and that Jacob would come in and have at least one series. Jaron Hall took every snap.
Jaron Hall took a seriously dirty hit to the knees. I'm concerned about his shoulder and knees right now. Kalani said he's fine.
Yeah.
But I am concerned.
Yeah, I heard last night he's fine and that he's in good spirits, and he says he'll 100% be ready for Notre Dame.
He was rubbing his left shoulder, right? And he kind of, his arm was down a little bit when he ran off. I am concerned. I am concerned.
Sure. And let's validate the concerns. Yes. Overall, from BYU fans, the rush defense in the first half has not been good the past 3 games. Okay, straight up, that concern is validated.
It can be better.
It can be better.
Yep.
But BYU is still making adjustments at halftime, specifically against Wyoming and Utah State. And then I didn't ever feel like BYU was truly in danger of losing the game last night once they got it halfway through the third quarter. I was like, okay, there we go.
Teams that have moral no one talks, losers talk about margin. I guess BYU won, we're concerned, so in that case. But Utah State's like, hey, let it halftime. Yeah. You lost the game.
It was tied at halftime.
Or tied at halftime, look at us. It's like, nope, don't text me that Duke is down 7 at halftime of the NCAA tournament. Tell me when there's 10 minutes left.
Sure.
Okay?
Our question